Okay, in this first section I want to firstly talk about the guitar pick. Since I was 12 years old when I started playing guitar, I've been through tons of different picks, and basically the goal is to try and find something that's really comfortable to play, that's not going to kind of get in the way and really hinder you as far as learning new techniques is concerned. And to this day I've settled on a 3mm big stubby pick, which has actually got a plaster wrap around it, and the reason for that is because the type of material that these picks are made out of, when you get hot and sweaty, these picks tend to kind of slip out your fingers. So I've got some surgical plaster on there, which kind of helps it stay in my hand. And the reason why I use these picks is they're quite thick. They've got a point on them. But they've actually got like kind of rounded edges, so it kind of glides quite easily through the string, but you still get quite a lot of attack. Say for alternate picking, it's really good for that, so all the notes kind of ring out equally. And if you don't kind of if you've got a fairly sort of flat pick or a fairly standard pick, one of the kind of best things that you can do to really maximise getting speed out of your alternate picking is to literally take the pick, and instead of having it flat to the string so it kind of gets stuck, you're going to angle it forward, I'd say about a 45-degree angle. And what this does is it kind of uses more of the edge of the pick, and as you kind of do down and up strokes on the string, it just glides off the string, but it catches it enough for you to kind of hear it properly. Also, the other thing I'd like to mention, I mean, it's no real big deal on how you hold the pick as long as it's quite comfortable. Some people even hold the pick with their middle finger on their right hand and thumb, and some people kind of angle the pick upwards instead of downwards. But for the benefit of this DVD, I'd like to just kind of show you the more traditional way and basically how I do it as well. So we're just going to angle the pick forward, hold the 7th fret on the G, and just kind of slowly put down up strokes onto the string like this. Okay, this might seem fairly basic, but a lot of people kind of overlook this really basic kind of mechanics in your right hand to do with picking. And kind of what you're doing is you're not just kind of moving the pick up and down, you're actually pushing through the string either way. So you're pushing it down and then you're pushing it up again. Also, when you build up speed, you're going to use more of your wrist, and if you kind of really try and get to the kind of extent of the boundary of your speed, then you're going to be using like a bit of forearm in there as well. And a bit of tension is a good thing, but you don't want to kind of over tense your arm, because that's when injuries can occur. So let me just do that again, but I'll kind of gradually pick up the pace, and you can hopefully see how like my wrist comes into play and my forearm as well. So as you can see from starting that out, I've actually just angled my pick forward, and I'm getting more of a smooth motion through the string. As I'm speeding up, my wrist is kind of getting more involved with actually moving my hand, and then towards the faster picking part, my forearm was kind of tensing very slightly in the elbow, and it was just kind of moving as well as moving my wrist as well. So your pick, wrist and forearm are kind of working in conjunction to actually give you that smooth movement. Now, the other thing I'd like to kind of talk about is whether you should anchor or not. This is a question that I kind of get asked a lot, and anchoring basically means that you use either your little finger or whichever that finger is, and you kind of lean it against the body. And there's quite a lot of guitar players that do this, people like Al Di Meola, John Petrucci, Yngwie Malmsteen, the sort of people that do a lot of picking. And they literally just kind of, it's almost something like to push against on the guitar, just to kind of steady your picking hand. Paul Gilbert, who's really well known for alternate picking and being incredibly fast, actually doesn't do anything like that at all. He literally just probably folds his fingers in like that and has his hand almost, you know, floating. So he's obviously kind of, you know, got around that, and you know, he plays great. So, but with this technique, you can literally kind of push against the body and steady your hand. Sometimes what I like to do is get the other finger and push it against the body, and what it does, it kind of steadies my hand, so I'm literally just keeping it in place, because otherwise it's going to go off on one a little bit, and especially when you're playing fast and you want to get it really accurate, it helps me concentrate. So what anchoring does is it kind of allows you to use a bit more of your forearm as well, so you can kind of, you know, lift your hand up a bit and get a bit more power in there. Now, you don't have to do that, obviously. You can, you know, take your finger off. You can have it, you know, just so you're picking without anchoring. Okay, so you don't really have to do anchoring if you don't want to. You can, you know, you can play without anchoring and just kind of keep your hand fairly free. Basically, it's not one person's opinion to say, oh, you know, you've got to anchor, otherwise you won't be able to play or pick fast, and you'll have somebody else saying, well, you shouldn't anchor because it's bad technique or whatever. Basically, you've got to do what feels comfortable for you, just as long as it's, you know, it's clean and it's precise, and you know, you feel comfortable doing it. Okay, the other thing with the right hand that I'd like to say as well is a fair amount of palm muting is also quite important when playing lead, because, you know, when you're doing soloing and stuff like that, you don't really want to kind of have your palm completely off the strings, because, you know, it can end up being quite a sort of an awful mess, especially at loud volume with a band, and you can get feedback problems and all that kind of thing as well. So a lot of lead playing takes place on, you know, the G string to the high string. I mean, obviously you've got the low 3 strings as well, and a lot of lead playing happens there. But when you're not playing on the low 3 strings, you can actually have your palm on them, and it just stops them ringing. So, you know, I mean, it seems fairly obvious really when you point it out, but some people kind of overlook that, and if, you know, you don't really mention it to somebody, then they're not going to think, oh, hang on, I better put my palm on there, otherwise it's going to make some, you know, horrible noise that I don't want. So, you know, when you're kind of playing, let me just play something for you so you can kind of hear the difference between, you know, palm muting and not palm muting. So I'll just play through an A minor first position pentatonic scale for you. First of all, I won't palm mute it, and the second time I will. So here's the first time. Okay, so with that, you can pretty much hear that there's little noises going on that, you know, you really don't want to be hearing, you know, especially if you're going to plan to speed that up. So here it is with palm muting, and you should just be able to hear the notes and nothing else. Okay, so hopefully to your ears that was a lot cleaner. The other thing I've kind of noticed as well, with my right hand especially, is I kind of sort of move it in that sort of general direction. So I start picking sort of just behind the neck pickup, and then it sort of like moves away sort of diagonally like that. So let me just play that again, and then just focus on what my right hand's doing. Okay, so what that's enabling me to do is just keep the angle of the pick forward, but rather than kind of move my hand across the strings like that, which is also going to cause noise at the other end, which you don't want, you're literally just going to be kind of moving your hand like that, making minimal noise and keeping the angle of the pick forward. Okay, so that's a fairly important thing to kind of look out for with palm muting. Also, it's quite important when you're doing any legato passages, say something like this. I mean, if I didn't palm mute, it would just sound like this, which which is kind of a bit more noisy and it's less tight, and it's nice to just keep things like that nice and clean so you can hear the notes that you're actually playing. Okay, the last thing in this section I want to sort of like talk about really is sort of left-hand hand position. Basically, throughout whenever I've been teaching, I've always kind of had problems with people where, you know, they'll start off in a hand position that kind of feels uncomfortable, and they'll want to do something else that feels more comfortable, or, you know, they'll end up keeping straight on a particular scale, and then when they get up to the top of the neck, they're not entirely sure what to do. With me, what I've found is, because I don't use my little finger as much as maybe a lot of other guitar players, I've kind of got more of a traditional sort of blues left hand positioning, especially when I get up to the G, the B and the high E string. And instead of my fingers being totally flat to the neck, they kind of move to the side. So what that basically means is that when I sort of like hook my first finger, the neck just kind of sits in that, and then it sort of moves to the side. So it kind of has that continuous kind of claw effect, and then my second and third fingers on my left hand just kind of extend out to play the notes that I want. So with that last legato run, I'd sort of start like that, sort of diagonal, or sort of diagonally onto the neck almost. And then as you get sort of like down, as you get down towards the low E string, you tend to kind of straighten your fingers up a little bit. Your thumb will probably come round to the actual bend in the neck, and then you'll actually try and utilise more of your wrist as well, because a lot of times I've seen players where they'll keep their arm fairly straight to the neck, and they won't actually bend their wrist to then you know, extend length to the little finger, which is something that can be a problem, especially when doing major scale positions quite low down the neck. But as you kind of progress up the neck, your hand position doesn't really change an awful lot. So, you know, if you can kind of get used to playing it really low, you know, down on the guitar, then as you move up, you're pretty much going to keep that same sort of hand position. And it helps because it keeps everything the same. A lot of the key to playing fast is trying to keep things consistent within, you know, your left and right hand. So you're not really having to think too much about keep changing, you know, your left hand positioning all the time to kind of fit in different licks. You want to keep it fairly the same. So if I just play through a G major first position major scale, I'll just play that slow, and you can, you know, just see how my my hand kind of goes from this position. So my thumb is just under the bend on the guitar like that, and so that allows me to get my little finger right up, you know, so I'm kind of like evenly spaced. A lot of people tend to kind of go for that option because they think they can't reach with the middle finger, but I very rarely see anybody kind of do that. And, you know, to be honest, people like Paul Gilbert do that, and it's great, but he's got incredibly long fingers, so it's, you know, it's really easy for him to sort of do that kind of thing. But for me, I don't feel like I've got the longest fingers as a guitar player. So I've got quite a big stretch between these two fingers, so I kind of just use that to my advantage and pull my wrist down so I can actually get my little finger up as well. So thumb's in the right place, fingers are in the right place, and you know, my sort of basic hand positioning is kind of like that, with my wrist bent. And as I sort of like move up the guitar, my thumb is just going to kind of sort of swivel around a little bit just to allow my fingers, you know, to go a bit more kind of diagonal to the neck. And well, I'll just play through it and then you can see what I mean. So here we go. So as you can see, my fingers start off fairly straight, and as I come down, they slightly just kind of move to the right like that, and then back down, and then sort of straight again. So that's a really good starting point for you know, for your left hand positioning, especially playing scales, you know, like major scale wise, down that far of the neck. And then, you know, you can kind of get used to that, and as you get up the neck, you're just kind of literally moving your arm, so it'll do exactly the same thing. So, you know, you've got your wrist bent, you've got your fingers in the right place, and your thumb is pretty much hovering around the bend of the neck or slightly under, unless you're kind of doing more pentatonic stuff, I suppose, which would mean that your thumb might come to sort of towards the top of the neck. Mainly because it kind of acts as a support. Your thumb's really important anyway for everything you do, because it's really supporting what your fingers are doing, and it's almost like a sort of clamping thing. I find that when I kind of push my thumb harder into the back of the neck, it makes me get a better grip on the strings the other side. You know, especially doing anything where you're doing lots of hammer-ons and pull-offs. You know, you can really kind of push against the neck to then, you know, push down harder on the fretboard the other side. So let me just play through first position A minor pentatonic, just so you can kind of see what my fingers are doing. Unlike the major scale position, what I'll be doing is pretty much using my sort of like first, second, and first and third finger, in fact, just to play the basic pentatonic shape. And you can also, you know, fill in the blanks of the first position pentatonic as well, you know, by playing more of the bluesy version, which then you're going to include your second finger on your left hand. But for now, this is just kind of the basic version, just so you can see how the fingers are working. Okay, the thumb is pretty much staying just slightly above the bend in the back of the neck, and probably just creeping a bit more over. Again, as you try and build up speed, especially on those top two strings. If you're going to do anything like this, I find that as I kind of speed up, my thumb kind of slowly pushes harder into the back of the neck, and enables you to kind of, you know, get more power into those fingers by pushing down on the strings. Because the faster you get, you find that, you know, you have to push down a little bit more to get the notes to ring out. Although when you're playing fast, you don't really want to be pushing down too hard, because it's going to kind of slow you down. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. It's you know, just practicing and keep doing it. And, you know, eventually you're going to find a happy medium. I mean, nobody can kind of tell you what that is. You have to just kind of, you know, get it to a point where you can feel it. You might be wondering why I'm kind of not using first, third and fourth finger on my left hand, but that's literally just a kind of strength point of view. You know, it is worth building up the strength in your left hand, because in your little finger on your left hand, because it really does come in handy when you're you know, when you're kind of doing other things. But I find, because I've got, you know, the big stretch between my first and second finger, that I can use my third finger, and I get a lot more, you know, evenness out of it. And plus the fact I find that using the second and third together works better for me. I've got a double jointed little finger, so it kind of is something else I've had to overcome. And the other thing as well is tone. I prefer the kind of tone in those fingers than I do the tone in my little finger. So that's just a couple of things to sort of, like, you know, bear in mind. So okay, well, pretty much just to sum up the first section, you know, we've been looking at the angle of the pick, you know, angling it forward, so, you know, you can practice, you know, your alternate picking, which we're going to look at slightly later in this DVD. Also, you know, hand positioning, that's a really important thing to kind of get under your belt. Again, we're going to be looking at that in greater detail throughout the DVD, and also palm muting as well. So now we're going to move on to the next section, and we're going to look at a few more things to build up your speed and stamina.